Welcome to Heritage Food Stories, Episode 10, the real story behind St. Patrick's Day and Irish immigrants in America. From no Irish need apply signs to massive parades, the history behind St. Patrick's Day reveals a powerful story of migration, struggle, and cultural pride as the Irish have become one of the largest ethnic groups in the United States. Today's episode creates context to how the Irish navigated race and mobility in America as we celebrate Irish American Heritage Month in March. I'm your host, Chef Mireille, chef, food historian, culinary storyteller, and a lifelong passion for global cuisines, culinary history, and the stories behind the food we eat. So let's dive deep into the rich history of the Irish in America. How Irish immigrants faced discrimination reshaped their identity and turned a quiet religious feast into one of America's biggest celebrations. Every March, the United States turns green. Parades, green beer, corned beef and cabbage, leprechauns with a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, all to represent one of the most recognizable cultural celebrations in the country. But here's the twist. St. Patrick's Day is not celebrated nearly as loudly in Ireland as it is in the United States. So who was St. Patrick really? And how did this religious feast day transform into a global and especially American cultural phenomenon featuring leprechauns? Can you believe St. Patrick was not even Irish? He was actually born in Roman Britain in the late 4th century, kidnapped as a teenager and enslaved in Ireland. After escaping, he later returned as a Christian missionary. His legacy in Ireland is religious. He's known for the spread of Christianity, the establishment of churches, education, and literacy. In Ireland, St. Patrick's Day historically remained a solemn religious holiday, not a party. The modern celebration we recognize today in the United States was shaped largely by Irish immigrants in America, particularly during the 19th century. Between 1845 and 1852, the Great Famine devastated Ireland. Potato blight destroyed the main food source for much of the population, and millions of people faced starvation. Over 1 million people died. Millions more left Ireland in search of survival. Many of those immigrants came to the United States. But life in America was not easy for the Irish. They were poor, mostly Catholic, in a largely Protestant country, and they arrived in huge numbers during a time of economic uncertainty. Anti-Irish prejudice was widespread. Irish immigrants faced no Irish need apply job advertisements, stereotypes portraying them as lazy, violent, or uneducated, discrimination because of their Catholic faith, exclusion from many professions and social institutions. Political movements like the Know Nothing Party openly campaigned against Irish and Catholic immigrants in the mid-1800s. For many Irish Americans, public celebrations of St. Patrick's Day became something more than a holiday. They became a statement. Parades and public gatherings were ways for Irish communities to say, "We are here, we are proud of our heritage, we belong." Some of the earliest St. Patrick's Day parades were organized in American cities, including New York, Boston, Chicago. In fact, large public parades were happening in the United States before they became common in Ireland. There is yet another layer to this history that often gets left out of St. Patrick's Day conversations. When Irish immigrants first arrived in large numbers in the United States during the 1800s, they were not immediately accepted as part of the American social mainstream. Many Protestant Americans viewed Irish Catholics as inferior, foreign, and dangerous. Political cartoons of the time even depicted the Irish with exaggerated ape-like features to suggest they were something less civilized. Sadly, in America, just about everything has a racial component, and the Irish, because they were deemed different, weren't even considered white. They were poor, Catholic, and spoke with accents that made them an easy target. In many cities, Irish immigrants lived in the same overcrowded neighborhoods and worked the same low paying jobs as free Black Americans. In other words, they started near the bottom of America's social ladder. But the United States had something that Ireland did not. With a rigid racial hierarchy built around skin color, over time, the Irish became white. Irish immigrants learned that one way to gain acceptance in American society was to distance themselves from Black Americans and align themselves with the privileges associated with being white. Historians sometimes describe this process as Irish immigrants becoming white. That phrase does not mean their skin color changed. It means that socially and politically, they gradually became accepted as part of the dominant white majority. Several things helped make that shift happen. Irish immigrants gained political power in cities like New York and Boston. They joined police forces, fire departments, and labor unions. They built strong voting blocs within the Democratic Party, and over time, they became part of the broader white working class. At the same time, racial divisions hardened in American society. Irish communities often competed with Black workers for jobs and housing, and tensions sometimes turned violent in cities during the 19th century. This is a complicated and sometimes uncomfortable part of American history, but it helps explain how race in the United States has always been shaped by politics, economics, and power. Understanding that context also helps us see Irish American history more clearly. The Irish were once outsiders in America, but over time, they became part of the dominant social group because of their whiteness. That transformation is part of the broader story of race and immigration in the United States. This history is especially relevant in today's times with anti immigration sentiments taking over in some communities across the United States. Okay, so now let's talk about Irish American Heritage Month. In the United States, March is also recognized as Irish American Heritage Month. The designation was formally proclaimed by Congress in 1991 to honor the contributions Irish Americans have made to the country. Irish immigrants and their descendants helped shape American society in countless ways. They became laborers who built canals, railroads, and cities, police officers, firefighters, and public servants, political leaders in major American cities, writers, artists, and musicians who shaped American culture. Today, more than 30 million Americans claim Irish ancestry, making it one of the largest ethnic heritage groups in the country. Irish American Heritage Month is meant to recognize that history, not just the stereotypes associated with the holiday. Now, here's a news flash. Corned beef and cabbage is not traditional Irish food. One of the biggest myths of St. Patrick's Day food is corned beef and cabbage. In Ireland, traditional meals were more likely to include bacon or ham, potatoes, root vegetables. In America, Irish immigrants substituted corned beef, which was affordable and widely available from Jewish butchers. Over time, it became a symbol of Irish American identity, not Irish cuisine. This is the beauty of immigrant stories in the United States, taking traditional recipes and adapting them to locally available ingredients and palates. This is why Irish American cuisine is different than Irish cuisine. In the same way, Italian American cuisine is not the same as Italian cuisine. When immigrant communities come to the United States, new cuisines evolve and develop. True Irish cooking reflects meat and seafood, particularly lamb, hearty stews, potatoes and other root vegetables, dairy, breads like Irish soda bread, and sweetbreads like barmbrack. Go beyond the American stereotypes and try some traditional Irish recipes this Irish American Heritage Month. These traditional Irish recipes will be linked in the show notes. Guinness lamb stew, colcannon, and barmbrack. St. Patrick's Day isn't really about leprechauns or green beer. It's about migration, identity, and how cultures change when people move. Understanding that history allows us to celebrate with intention, honoring where traditions come from and how food tells the story of survival and belonging. Food often tells the story of these transitions better than anything else. When Irish immigrants arrived in the United States, they brought memories of the foods they knew from Ireland. But survival meant adapting. Ingredients were different, neighborhoods were different, and communities were forming in a completely new social landscape. Dishes like corned beef and cabbage are not simply Irish food. They are Irish American food, shaped by immigration, city life, and the realities of starting over. That is the real story behind many St. Patrick's Day traditions. They are reminders of how immigrant communities hold on to their identity while also creating something entirely new. Thanks for listening today. You'll find the full articles, recipes, and related resources linked in the show notes. For more stories where food meets history and culture, subscribe to my newsletter on Substack, Heritage Food Stories. I'm Chef Mireille. See you in the next episode.